that we found when we were going through those boxes, those dirty boxes in storage. Some of you may think this is a familiar face. I don't know if anyone recognizes this guy, but he was on the stage last night introducing
He's a year
Geri.
or two younger there, isn't he?
Yeah, just a little bit. We were just delighted to find these kinds of images in those boxes, and you could really see how much Erroll was adored. And I'll let Geri talk a little bit about his contemporaries.
So why don't you run through the photographs? So we see Great Duke Ellington, and there are photographs of, we have Roy Eldridge here. We have George Sherry on the left, Art Tatum there next to Erroll in the middle, and Count Basie.
Those are the three that we have here. So, yes. And actually, this next one, you can talk a little bit about some of these folks as well.
Okay, so these are endorsements from iconic figures of the 20th century. So people like Dick Clark, Sarah Vaughan, Frank Sinatra, Jackie Kennedy, Mary Lou Williams, Eleanor Roosevelt, Steve Allen, Norman Granz, Gene Kelly, Wynton Marsalis, Tony Bennett, Count Basie, Johnny Carson, Rosemary Clooney, Marvin Gaye, Dizzy Gillespie, Woody Allen, and Clint Eastwood. And so these are people he collaborated with, or people that are inspired by him.
And this is a letter on the right from Dick Clark, admiring Errol's playing.
Yeah, in the archive we found wonderful letters written to either Martha or Erroll, a couple from President Truman, a couple from Eleanor Roosevelt, talking about how much they loved his music and what his music meant to them and their families.
Right. But as Robin said, when we look at this list of names, and there really isn't, what there should be in terms of scholarship. So we'll talk a little bit more about that later. In addition to that, we also discovered some great visual elements that you can see in the Concert by the Sea, which we'll talk about a little later, adds to the reinvigoration of Errol's name and who he was as an artist. So these are just beautiful posters from the jazz world at that time. You can see the names again, Sarah Vaughan, Count Basie.
By the way, I just want to jump in. If you look at the ticket prices, Airline, you see $2.50, $3, $3.75. Look what you can see for $3.75.
And of course the phone book.
You found the phone book.
If we could have Dawn stand up for a minute in the front row. We have T-shirts now based on these original phone books that you can actually have one of your very own. Share with the world. So there's regular sheet music and full orchestral scores, I should say, where they performed with various orchestras, and of course he is Misty. The Erroll Garner postage stamp is kind of an interesting find. And again, all of these artifacts that show us what a well-loved artist he was and all around the world, not just here in Monterey or New York, but finding his passport let us see very clearly what was stamped was places that he would travel internationally. I'll let Robin speak to this slide. There were, I think, 22 boxes of legal documents that tell a whole other story in the archive, which is very significant to the story.
No, the lawsuit is very, very important. This particular image, though, is interesting because it's really about Martha Glazer, who has a very long and very noble history of civil rights activism. Beginning in Detroit. In Detroit, she worked in Detroit Youth Council. She did publicity for the Wayne County Trade Union Council. During the riots in '43, she was very much involved in forming what became the Entertainment Industry Emergency Committee to combat race hatred. She took a strong stance against segregation in any of the concerts, and she ended up working for Norman Granz as well. So by the time she ends up in Chicago, she works at the Commission on Human Relations. By the time she meets Erroll Garner, she's a veteran of civil rights activity. And the fact that she made the choice, she agreed with Mr. Garner to basically to only represent him, which is kind of unprecedented. That together they represent a kind of wedge against both an unjust industry and racism as a whole. And that's part of the story that needs to be told. It's a story that, we tend to focus on, who's writing what lyrics and what songs are explicitly sort of advocating civil rights. But in fact, you're talking about a life lived, partnership for justice. I think that's actually worth it. And this is an extraordinary letter, by the way.
There are a lot of these extraordinary letters, and I hope, again, just to mention what Robin said before, that students will go and they will research and they will pull out all of this extraordinary history that, has gone unseen and unheard for so long. I do also want to mention that the Erroll Garner Jazz Project is dedicated to ensuring that any proceeds from this project go towards African American community-based jazz initiatives. So that is built into this project. And from students' vision and knowing that this is a critical piece of the story and that it needs to happen this way.
I have a question. I
Yeah.
was wondering between what you were saying, Steve, and what you just said, Robin, about this reverting, this idea of a body of work that was initially negotiated between a record company and an artist, reverting back to the artist and how that plays in the context of entertainment law historically.
Yeah, I mean, usually the record companies put up a big fight to really have things revert back to their original owners, and they do everything they can to re-up the copyrights and re-up the ownership. So you have lots of situations where most things are still sitting in their archives. I mean, you have very unique situations where you create archives of music, like you could maybe talk about what goes on here in Monterey, but there's lots of recordings being done at festivals and stuff like that, and the reasons why you never get to hear them are not because they're not recorded properly or filmed properly by great technicians and stuff. It's usually because there's no methodology to let the music come out. There's no process by which you can put out a record that crosses label boundaries and artists that cross label boundaries. So you have this wealth of music that exists, live music especially, that exists, that never sees the light of day. I've been working in New York on the Bottom Line Archive, which was this iconic club from 1974 to 2005. And rock music, jazz music, Brecht Brothers, Springsteen, Petty, on and on and on. Most of it is sitting in the owner's garage. There's 1,200 tapes. And why? Is because he cannot find a legal pathway to release this. So that's part of what makes Erroll's experience and Martha's experience so extraordinary, because they were able to retrieve it. And just a funny story, when we go to the record companies and talk about Erroll and Martha, it's really great, because when you talk about Erroll, obviously there's incredible respect. But when you talk about Martha, they go like this. They put their hands on their head and they go, oh boy, we had to deal with Martha. But really, her cantankerousness and bulldogness was really the reason why things are all in one place that finally we can all listen to.
Right. I would just add to that. You're absolutely right. I think these are really important issues. Then it's the flip side. The flip side is when companies release work that the artist doesn't want released. And that was the essence of Erroll's argument with Columbia. And in fact, Columbia it wasn't exactly a countersuit, but they demanded that he put up a $40,000 bond to pay for damages to Columbia if he loses the suit. Of course, he won the suit. But then the other thing that happens, which is pretty interesting, is like after Thelonious Monk died, Columbia opened the vaults and put out all kinds of stuff that he never wanted out there. And what ends up happening is that the estate gets a piece of it, but the record company gets a lot of it. So it's very tricky. There's the archival importance of the material. The fact that some of the Monterey Jazz Festival concerts are actually at Stanford. It was a very great archive for me writing the book on Thelonious Monk. But at the same time, you got to ask the question, well, what happens when an artist loses control, has a session that he or she just didn't like, and what happens to that? So it's a very fine line between these two things.
Thank you both. I think, for all of you who are here with us now, I hope that these conversations will maybe make you think a little bit differently about the kind of music that you hear and where it's coming from. I think these are really important questions, and it's a very deep discussion to be having that needs to happen. So we'll go on now to talk a little bit about how we transform these materials that we found and how this team that was created to do this work was able to do that. And Steve will talk a little bit about the tapes themselves.
Right, well, in the audience is Jessica Thompson, who did a fabulous job of remastering. So here's a quick story. So while we're going through the archive, we're seeing all of these notes and stuff. Concert by the Sea Volume 2. We're like, what? Concert by the Sea Volume 2. So we start hunting, looking to try to find the paperwork, and it became really clear that over the years Martha was trying to do a Concert by the Sea Volume 2. So what we decided to do was really to try to see if we could find any tapes that had the complete concert. So there were some tapes in Martha's archive and Erroll's archive that had some of the complete show, and we kept going back to the Columbia Records Library to try to find more tapes there. So I think on the third or fourth time we went there, we decided to look in a different way. So we stopped looking under Erroll's name, we stopped looking under Concert by the Sea, and we started looking under location. We said, well, where was it recorded? Well, it was recorded in Carmel. Who recorded it and who produced it? So we decided to look in a different way. So to cut to it quickly, we found the session books from Columbia Studios, found the time where George Avakian was actually working on the tapes. And lo and behold, in the book, there was a number that we hadn't searched in the archive before, and when we brought up that number, there were 8 tapes that were annotated as only Carmel, remote at Carmel. And so these tapes had been lost in the Columbia Records Library for 60 years and had never been played since the times that they were placed in the archive. So that was the basis of what we, the tapes that we used to do the new Concert by the Sea.
Wow. So here's Jessica, as Steve mentioned, doing mastering work. She's local now, by the way. She moved from New York to your area, and now I'm just mastering here. And now this slide is of the interviews that some of you may have seen are on this new complete Concert by the Sea. This was when we were searching for the tapes, and we did look at the Stanford archive trying to find the concert, and then came across interviews with the artists, which we were so excited to add to the end so people could hear Erroll and his company musicians. We'll let Jim talk a little bit about the way that the Concert by the Sea is connected to the Monterey Jazz Festival.
Well, I think we wouldn't be here today if it hadn't been for this concert. This opened the door to a series of concerts that eventually led to the festival. And it was the first one. Jimmy Lyons had been involved with Armed Forces Radio in Los Angeles before he moved up here. And in that job, he spent a lot of time interviewing and getting to know a lot of artists. And he came up with this idea when he was here, doing some concerts on Monday night. Why Monday night? People closed in San Francisco and they were traveling to Los Angeles. And he discovered, and I know this is true of this concert, that he could get them to work for less than what they normally charge. If it was an off day, it was extra money. And so he did these concerts. The importance of this one, to me, is in several things. There are a lot of stories about how the festival started. One of them that's told a lot, there's on Kennery Row, the one remaining building, which is Ed Ricketts, known in Steinbeck terms as the Doc Ricketts Lab. And there was a group of businesses in Monterey who bought the place and kept it. And Hal Hallett, who was the first president of the festival, went there and said, guys, let's put on a jazz festival. Well, how did Hal Hallett know about jazz or Jimmy's desire to do a jazz festival? And I saw that unfold as a kid at my house. Jimmy Lyons was having dinner with my family, and he had this idea of doing a jazz festival. But he couldn't raise the money. He thought, Carmel, there's got to be money, but no one was real interested. Once he did these concerts, my father, who's the most far out music he ever listened to was the Firehouse 5+2, which I got sick of as a kid, but it was better than hearing Bing Crosby. I didn't say that. So we got pulled off to this concert. At the first concert I seen, my sister and I was 12. The second concert, I think my little brother came along, and that's when I met all the guys. Went backstage and got to sign the album. But this introduced these businessmen who wouldn't have had a clue until they heard this concert. My father set up an appointment for Jimmy Lyons to meet with the publisher of the Herald. It just happened, his secretary was Betty Hallett, married to Hal Hallett. Hal just bought a printing company in town. He was looking for more business, like programs. He did the program then for the Big Crosby Golf Tour. He was looking for business. So when he heard about this, he latched onto it. My father was on the board later. He didn't go on for a while. He believed as a newspaperman he shouldn't be on the board. But he hauled all of us, there were 6 kids in my family, and we were driving across the country. You can figure that, anyway. But he hauled us to Newport to see the site of the Newport Festival. It was a month off in timing, but we saw it, and that was information he brought back. So the exposure that these concerts, they built an audience, they built business leaders who were asked to advertise. Jimmy had advertisers on his radio show here locally on KDON, 1460 AM. And these advertisers, they knew about the festival. They knew that these concerts were sold out. In fact, the story is, the Ella Fitzgerald concert, he sold twice. There were 2,400 people for 1,200 seats. I have a great picture of Ella on stage, surrounded by chairs. But this introduced jazz to everyone but the Monterey City Council. They weren't going to accept the festival until Dave Brubeck came out here in the fairgrounds and played a concert for the city council and took Starting with the Fringe on Top as a straight music and as a jazz song. And those people then said yes, because the business community had heard this, the Herald, the local paper had covered these concerts, and it was established because of the Monday night concerts, starting with this very concert.
Wow. I would just like to say that doing archival work is not just great because you're finding treasures from the archive that are physical, but you also find the treasure of oral history when you start to unearth these things, and then it leads to stories like that. So thank you.
I'll come up with all kinds of stories if I get to sit next to this.
Oh. So we'll move on and talk a little bit now about how that led to last night. So when we discovered this connection, we were back in New York at the Erroll Jazz Project. We started thinking about the 60th anniversary, and we just looked online and saw that it was the same weekend as the Monterey Jazz Festival, which now we understand is not such a big coincidence, but at the time, very fortuitous. And we just want to thank Aura Harris, if you could stand, and we just want to acknowledge you for making this concert happen. Because without Aura, we just want to make sure that you know what went into making this happen this weekend, and Aura really helped us do that, thankfully. So Geri was able to play last night. Well, she'll tell you a little bit about that.
And thanks to Aura, who contacted Tim Stevens, who made this all happen for us. And we're just really thrilled to have had, this quick turnaround, this opportunity to make this happen so quickly. I mean, to pull that group of musicians together, they were available. Very excited to do it. I just want to acknowledge that Mr. Cobb is recovering from being in the hospital recently. He's much better, but not strong enough to travel and come perform. And Victor Lewis came and supported us for the concert. And so I'm just really excited having the opportunity to sit in that spot where I was sitting, and to hear Jason and Russell and young Christian Sands, who is Dr. Billy Taylor's protege. Dr. Taylor talked a lot about Erroll Garner as well. And so you can see Christian's breadth, and his knowledge of the history of the piano, as well as Jason. And then we had Derek Oles, wonderful bassist. So I'm just really thrilled.
You left out the best one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Geri has been so instrumental, I have to say, this last year as we've been working on the project to help bring, Erroll Garner's name out and really acknowledge what an artist he was through the work that you do, which is so beautiful. So we're really grateful to you for your help as well.
Thank you. It's just a privilege, to have the archive at Pitt. Our students are already working on it. I don't know if you want to say a little bit about
We'll talk about
the,
that. I think we want to just briefly go back to the photos. This is, and we'll definitely come back to that, but we want to talk about the images that you'll see when you purchase the Complete Concert by the Sea, when you do that later today. We have some never-before-seen photos, which again, thank you, Jim Costello, for finding these. He was able to, through our early conversations, remember that when his uncle was photographing that night, you know, he may have had, oh, I don't know, maybe some negatives in a shoebox somewhere, right? And we were talking, and then later came to find out.
Well, I found about 100 negatives, and this is all available light photography in 1955. This wasn't fast films in those days, and it's a dark hall. Not as dark today, but it was a dark school auditorium. And my uncle Peter Brennick had gotten to know Jimmy Lyons. He hung out after Jimmy did his radio show. KGLN had a studio here in Buenos Salinas, and got to know Jimmy. Helped him with his house, which I did too. He built in Big Sur, and he shot this. He wasn't looking for the Erroll this night. He was just shooting. They didn't use any photos of the concert. They did a review. But he always carried a camera. He was a professional photographer. He always carried, and he was, you can see from the pictures, he was backstage the whole time, or at the silent stage, and he shot some pictures. I did a bunch of photos for the 40th Monterey Jazz Festival of Peters. I found this box. I went up to see him as he was dying, and he didn't want me there while I met with his lawyer. He sent me up to his aircraft hangar. He'd been building airplanes. He was 80 and just trying to finish the last airplane, which didn't quite get done. But I found this box, and it was covered, they'd sanded the airplanes. It was covered in about this much dust, probably real healthy stuff. And I pulled them out, and I was able to scan a lot of them and copy them. And when I first talked to Jocelyn, I said, I think I've got 30 negatives. Well, I got ready to send them to her, and I found 100 images. And so she picked quite a few that you saw last night. And to me, they're just wonderful pictures. They just changing expressions in each one. They're just fascinating pictures. And so it's quite a collection.
And the behind-the-scenes images that, you know, you don't often get to see. We have some of these as well. So Erroll getting ready for the concert. It's just beautiful. Just beautiful. And here we have Erroll with Jimmy Lyons. So we were able to see this room the other day at the Sunset Center, and if you get a chance to go over and check out the Sunset Center, they still have performances there, and you can see where it really happened. So now we have a sort of a slide to show you the evolution of the covers of Concert by the Sea. So from the very first one, you can see on the top left, to what came out in the 70s. And Steve, this was the stereo version?
Right. So this one next to me is that awful reconstituted, mastered stereo version. The tape was 7.5 IPS mono. So that's it. There's no stereo. There shouldn't be stereo. It's glorious mono. So we put it back that way on the Complete Concert by the Sea.
So we were actually able to update the cover and take a new photograph in Point Lobos to show you know it's a very beautiful place. We've come to be able to visit there, and now we have a new model as well. And of course, we're so fortunate to have Robin Kelly and Geri writing new liner notes, as well as Dan Morgenstern, who some of you might know, there with his Emmy Awards, and that's George Rock, the original producer of Concert by the Sea with Erroll. Now we'll tell you a little bit. If we're doing okay on time, we'll work on this next part with you here, Erroll Garner Jazz Project, The Future, and have Geri talk a little bit about the archive finding its permanent home at the University of Pittsburgh.
thank you, Susan. University Library Systems has posted the archive, and it's online, along with 44 years of the University of Pittsburgh Jazz Seminar that Nathan Davis established. So we're really excited to have access. It just happened this semester, and we have a new class being taught by one of our new professors, Michael Heller, on archives. And our grad students are already using the archive, researching it, and we're going to I think, do an exhibit soon this semester on campus, and we're looking to go out into the community and see it, be exhibited in one of the major centers in the community. And hopefully it'll be touring, these photographs, these posters, memorabilia, and so that's a dream that we're having.
And this photograph you're seeing here is actually the students at the university performing Erroll's music. And this just happened when we had the archive come there. They just, thanks to Geri, getting them the music.
Right, and it's wonderful. We have this whole body of music now that we can access and perform. We're looking at also Erroll Garner Young Pianist Series that we're establishing in October. So we're going to have young piano players coming and playing in honor of Erroll Garner, and hopefully continue to develop that into who knows what.
So you can really see how Concert by the Sea is just the tip of the iceberg, because there's so much more happening with Erroll's archive and the university, and really bringing this full story to life. So we of course have Geri Allen, and then this is I think a poster from that same concert. And when you leave, or if you have your phone, you're walking around today and you want to check out the website, you can learn more about the project here. We have a mailing list as well if you'd like to sign up and get more updates about what we are doing. You can actually pick up one of these brochures and learn more about it as well. We have those available, and the t-shirt you mentioned. Yeah. This is one of our archival assistants who transfer a lot of tapes, doubling as a model. Thanks, Emma. And we are actually in the process now of getting ready the other music that's in the archive to be released in different ways in the coming year. So we look forward to sharing that with you. And if we do we have any time for questions? Are we doing okay? Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much to everyone.